there's a pastor who says the biggest problems about church is they want the 10%, but they don't tell you what to do with the 90%. So we then realize after many years that some of the problems that we're experiencing in ULP is that we've mentored over the last 12 years or so hundreds of young people. And we see them coming here in their Porsches now. And we realize we've empowered them. Not that there's nothing wrong with a Porsche, but have we empowered them enough to know what to do with that wealth? And I think that's why this partnership works, and it's going to work well. I ask you to take out your phones and those online as well. If you can just go onto your internet, you don't charge a lot of your data, and just go into the website that's on there, called menti.com, MENTI.com. There's only one question there. There's a code. You put in that code, and then the code will take you to the website. Once you're on the website, you just put the code 17610832. For those online, this will keep being displayed throughout the event. And I hope you answered. You believe you have sufficient financial knowledge to make a good quality financial decision. I'm not sure. So please participate, and please keep sharing this Menti. We'll probably have it open until tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon or so. Yeah, without any further ado, I arrived here today and Babu Khatebe said, which leadership presentation must I prepare in case our speaker doesn't pitch? And I said to him, if there was any speaker, I would worry, but not this one. Okay. Not this one. And I'll tell you why, because as I was going out, Ausintop was complaining that some of our volunteers are late. And I look up, and Dada Mohale is helping carry the coffee drinks that you guys. So the coffees that you are drinking, Dada Mohale. And last year I come here, we like, isn't Dada Mohale going to arrive? He's going to arrive. So we're all walking around the house, and I go to the kitchen, I find him opening the fridge, helping himself with it, because he said, "Moke high." And as I say that, this picture, we first hosted in Dada Mohale in 2014, July, on the 17th. Just show that thing. Look at how young. Dave and I were still, I think we were still in our last days at Deloitte. And if you can just show the picture of Dave. And Dave and Linda were there as well. Yeah, there you are. And that's the day. And the gentleman behind Dave there is actually the executive at Rand Water, managing our water in South Africa and his wife. And Dave has been through the journey with us, and that's why when it came to partnerships with him running the National Mentorship Movement, it really made sense. And I remember it was so packed. We had all the blue chairs, which there's about 200 of them. We then put in black chairs, the small ones, which was 100 of them, and then we put plastic chairs. We still didn't have enough space. So we had people standing on the side. It was our fifth speaker when we started. We started ULP after Mr. Tulani Kabash. And since that time, he's honored us every single time. Where's that picture? If you go back to the one picture with me and him, we stood there because Dada Mohale that day arrived at 3, and we didn't know what to do with him. So we showed him around the whole place. And there he affirmed us that this organization will go far, and it will impact a lot of people. And 7 years later, here he is. And we've never had a poster with postponed with Dada Mohale. We've always had and that's the confidence that I had when I said. And so today they say to me, you have to introduce Ntate Mohale. So I say to them, no, I don't have to. Because it's not only is it a lengthy CV, which I could be here and say, you know, he's a chairman of Bidvest, chancellor of Free State University, or professor at UJ, president of BUSA. I can regurgitate that to you. But I don't think that defines the man, because normally when he speaks, he defines himself. There's a thing that goes around in ULP when you say Ntate Mohale is coming. They say, oh, Mogoditswa no Moholo. So we know he's greeting very well. But you know, as I pass over to Confidence, you know, one of the things that makes us not only want to document his story through these talks over the years, and we're starting to do that and to articulate them in writing, is that his principles are very close to ours. I was looking for a copy of Lift As You Rise, and you know, in the preface of Lift As You Rise, Ntate Mohale tells a story. And I hope I'll regurgitate it correctly, because they didn't want to find that copy for me here. But he says at 17, he got married to his wife. Okay. And then he tells us, I think at 21, having his first daughter. And it goes on to tell us about the journey of his career. And at the end of that preface, he says a sentence. He says, I've been blessed with many things, and I'm paraphrasing now, in my life. If I had to go back and do it over again, the only thing I could do is marry Susan earlier. So with that, here's Ntate Mohale in Confidence. Give him a hand over.
Prof, you've been welcomed by our CEO, but please allow me to also extend a warm welcome to ULP Authors Forum. You've been with us a couple of times, but you haven't been on this particular forum, the ULP Authors Forum. So welcome, Prof. Now into the book. I was looking at the title, Behold the Turtle, and I was puzzled. Because I thought to myself, if we were to observe the animal kingdom, we can behold the lion with its magnificent roar. We can behold the elephant with its magnificent size. Why should we behold the turtle?
Ntate, thank you for having me, but most importantly, the people that made time in their busy schedule to come and have this conversation with us, and those that are listening from home. It's very touching, humbling, and honoring.
Yes.
At the same time. So behold the turtle is an African adage. Like lift as you rise, it's an African adage. It simply says that for one to move from point A to point B, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Risk it all. Literally dance with death. Because if you don't, you will be warm, safe, and secure, but you're not getting anywhere fast. Behold, the turtle says, all of us begin to die when we are silent about things that genuinely matter. It says, let's all stick our neck out because this world will not end because of the things that bad people do, but it will end because of all of us that watch them and do nothing.
Yes, sir.
Behold, the turtle could have been a Shakespearean quote, but I chose an African adage because when you kill an entire clan, a tribe, like the Hutus did to the Tutsis on the 27th of April 1994, when we were in the snaking queues to cast our first democratic vote. 800,000 of them were killed. By the end of that month, 1 million. But for us as a people with great natural endowments, we have to tell these stories ourselves. There's another African adage that says, until and unless the lions have their own storytellers, the stories about hunting will always glorify the hunter. That history is up to the temporary occupants of the corridors of power. So that happened in Rwanda, we call it a genocide.
Yes, sir.
When you exterminate an entire nation, generation. When men kill women, we call it femicide. But when you kill a people's culture, their mores, folkways, their form of faith and worship, the way they get married, the way they engage, interact, and interface, the way they meet their own laws, the way they motivate and inspire young people. It's called ethnocide. When you take a culture of a people and you subjugate them to slavery and a life of perpetual wanting and begging. So as I end, it's no accident that black people are amazing, wonderful, and magnificent.
Yes.
That we have accomplished some truly beautiful things. The pyramids in Egypt, the science and mathematics of the Moors that were taken to civilize Europe. And when white people come to this country and they look at the Sphinx, and the Sphinx have broad nostrils of black people, they say this doesn't fit the narrative we have told these people when we were bringing Christianity to them. Therefore, they chipped away the broad nostrils. So when you go to Egypt today, in Cairo, you'll see that all the Sphinx have their nostrils chipped because their nostrils look like yours and mine. So it's no accident that everything that is good and progressive and godly is white. And everything that is black and heathen and backwards, it's you and I. Therefore, it's about time that we reclaim our spaces. We go to those spaces where hitherto it has not been fashionable to go to. Hence, behold the turtle. In full it says, behold the turtle, comma, he only makes progress when his neck is stuck out.
Profound. Now, when the turtle chooses to stick its neck out, there is often or sometimes an eagle somewhere in the sky saying, now is in the open, now is my opportunity. What do we say to those who say, I see the corruption happening, I know what's happening, I've got information on this, but if I blow the whistle, if I go and report, my livelihood may be at stake, my life may be at stake. The eagles and the vultures are circling. If I stick my neck out, I pose a danger to myself. What do we say to pour courage into the hearts of those people?
So for me, I would say, it's about time that the good people put as much work, time, energy, and effort in what they do as the bad guys do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela and Reginald Oliver Tambo were middle class. They were comfortable. They had a law practice in downtown Joburg called Chancellor House. They didn't have to worry about these poor blacks because they were doing fine. But they risked it all like the turtle. They spent their best productive years in Robben Island. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela was married to Nomzamo Winfred Madikizela, later Mandela, for less than 2 years. In that less than 2 years, they were already blessed with 2 kids. You see a picture of these young kids clinging onto this lanky, tall, truly beautiful specimen for dear life, to say, Dad, don't leave us. But he risked it all because he knew that would never be truly free until other Africans are free. So 13,338 weeks later, after the first country became free from colonialism in 1957, Ghana. The president of Ghana says, of course we celebrate this, we are free from colonialism. Kwame Nkrumah says, but Ghana will never be free, truly free, until the whole of Africa is free. So first speech that he makes, he talks about Cape to Cairo, Malagazia to Morocco, must be free. Let me end by saying, on a Saturday morning, when we were preparing for the release of all political prisoners, and later on for the eventual release of Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela from Pollsmoor prison, because for the 2 years before he was removed from Robben Island to this wonderful house. Kwet Masire gets asked a question which is published on Saturday to say, you are part of the frontline states. South Africa has a tendency in the middle of the night to drive in their mix to go to the frontline states and bomb the living daylights out of these exiles. They do so in Botswana, in Lesotho. They did that in Nigeria, in Kenya. Are you not afraid when you harbor these MK people in your country, small as you are, with an insignificant army? And he replies, and he says 2 things. One, he says, if I don't help them, I'll be denying my Africanness. I'll be denying the same fate that is me because they represent who I am and what I am. Lastly, he says, even with this insignificant army, when attacked and provoked, even the worm can tear.
Powerful. To our online audience and our in-house audience, I'm sure questions are already bubbling. So please, we're going to give, firstly, our in-house audience an opportunity. So if you have a few questions, I believe we'll be able to take maybe 3. And to our online audience as well on YouTube and Facebook, please pose your questions and we'll direct them at the professor. Prof, the last time, well, not the last time, I think when you presented your first book, Lift As You Rise, we were about 200 stacked in here. Today, I think the number is probably around 80. And it is because in the last couple of years, something called COVID-19 came to our shores. But in the book, you speak of another pandemic, which has been with us even before COVID-19. And when merged with COVID-19, it became a catastrophe. Can you talk about that particular pandemic as well?
Yes. So South Africa has a tendency of being helped by global events. So when the pandemic hit us, it found us already prostrate, face down, finished, compromised, and vulnerable. The first, in the recent memory, we talk about the 9 wasted years of state capture, where in 5 years, these thieves stole 1.5 trillion South African rands. This is 2/3 of what Edward Kieswetter collects in a year from you and I and big business and VAT was stolen in the first 5 years. In the 9 wasted years, why we coined the phrase is because we were siphoning off, on average, about 200 billion South African rands a year, every year, to the 2 Zupta families. I'm not even going to tell you about how many schools we would have built, how many hospitals we could have built, but how many of the 2,250 pit latrine toilets in Limpopo alone could have been eliminated. I won't even say how many young kids, Michael Komape, 5-year-old, and Lumka, who died a sad, tragic, and regrettable death in the pit latrines, we could have eliminated. So first, pandemic. Then the second is when we were in a recession, not a technical recession. Because South Africans in the last 5 years, they feel it in their back pockets. That their discretionary purchasing power and disposable income has been eroding. And therefore, our quality of life has been eroding, in spite of the promise by those who refer to themselves as our leaders, talking about a better life for all, implying improving the quality of lives of the majority of our people, especially those that are less fortunate than us. The third pandemic was when Moody's then joins Standard & Poor and Fitch as the rating agencies to downgrade us below investment grade, thereby rendering the cost of borrowing for government, for business, but for you and I, that much higher for the same quantum of debt. As if that's not enough, we then deem it fit to layer a fifth pandemic, a own goal, self-inflicted harm. The 2 weeks in July of rampant looting, in that failed insurrection. Very few countries in the world can survive one of these catastrophes. Here we are, South Africans, we had at least 5 of them, just here at home. What are our chances, collectively as a people with great natural endowments? Especially because our struggle is to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, all of us have not succeeded in eliminating the legacy of apartheid. So as I end, the last pandemic is the infodemic. Never before in the history of mankind are we exposed to weapons of such mass destruction as the smartphones in our hands. Because now, all of us have access to information, but also misinformation. When you look at this notion called vaccine hesitancy, you say when the pandemic hit us, I would say for South Africa, on the 15th of January, 2 years ago, because today is day number 727 of a national lockdown. On the 26th of this month will be a full 24 months in the national lockdown. So none of us can claim to be normal, especially because we are social animals in bone and marrow. We have been designed to be social. Yes. What we miss more than anything else is to hug another human being, kiss them 3 times on each of their cheeks, because that's what makes us truly human. So there are 3 buckets of people when you think about this pandemic. One is the anti-vaxxers. It doesn't matter what we say, how loud we speak, we're not going to change them. Small minority. There's another small minority of people, slightly bigger than the first group, of people who just want access. if you are in the dusty hills of Emondlo, Nkandla, Engutu, in the dusty hills of KwaZulu-Natal, sometimes Langanyanga in the Western Cape, you don't even have the 50 rand to get onto a public transport, a taxi, to go and get vaccinated. Therefore, our job is to take it to them. That's why the Johnson & Johnson is a single dose, so that if you're up in the mountain, you inoculate them once and you don't have to come back again. Except we are now on to the first booster. Maybe we'll go to the second booster. But what should worry you and I, and hence behold the title, is this 80% of the people in the middle who could do with better information. And sometimes people share with them of a majority of one who got vaccinated and the arm got swollen and say, that's why you don't need this. So if we can reach those people, the target that the president set for us in January of 67% herd immunity, at that time there was 60.1 million of us. Had we started then, we were talking about 40 million people. For probably at a rate of 100,000 a day, every day, it would have taken us 400 days or 13.3 months, which means we're already planning, agitating, and orchestrating to finish this vaccination only in 2022. So now as we speak, we're talking last month of 32 million vaccines administered, 48% of the adult population. So we've missed this target because net, we are probably around 30% of the people that are vaccinated. So as we mourn the deaths of maybe 100 people that have been killed directly by the virus, the scientists tell us that when you look at unexplained deaths, the graph, and you look at the run rate now, probably this virus has killed 3 times that number. So we talk about 300,000 people. So the president, in announcing yesterday the relaxation of these regulations, says probably 60 to 80% of us have been exposed to this virus, therefore have built natural immunity. And it's not difficult to understand, because if you go to Alexander, 670,000 people, an area of 6 square kilometers, 2 kilometers away from the richest square mile in the continent called Sandton, just across the bridge. Has she been there? It's an informal settlement that at any point in time will have 10, 20 people. They drink from a 750 ml of Lion and Black Label, and they would take a swag and give it to another and give it to the other. There you know that not only the virulence, but the transmissibility has been quite high. And accepting that 90% of the people are asymptomatic, it makes sense that we are probably closer to 80% of the people that have now reached their own natural immune system. So we look forward to going to watch our favorite soccer games, to go to the theater, observing all the non-pharmaceutical protocols. But I also celebrate the fact that as I go running, I don't have to be putting on my mask like all of us when we're outside.
The term that has been popularized during this period is a new normal. But I like the term, I don't know if you coined it, but it's a beautiful term. You speak of a better normal. What are the opportunities that are present and inherent in the COVID-19 pandemic?
So I'm saying when we look back at this pandemic, I think all of us, hindsight is a perfect science. We are going to extract some few learnings. So the last pandemic like this was April of 1918. It ended in February of 1920. Took 2 years. Affected and infected 500 million people which was a third of the world population. It killed 17 million people plus 3. So it's 20 million. And when we have time in question and answers, I'll tell you why plus 3. The war itself, the First World War, killed 17 million people. Hence the reference of 17 plus 3. That this pandemic killed more people than the war, the first war itself. And it came in 4 waves. The second wave killed more people than the first wave. So those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat these mistakes. So for us, the significance is that there's no point in hankering for a new normal or thinking about the old normal. Some Africans now says, it was maybe better when we were led by white male Afrikaners, because those that we call our leaders have actually killed more black people and more small and medium enterprises and more black senior executives than the whole of apartheid put together. Hence the term, maybe what we want is a better normal, better. The Americans talk about build back better. But why better for us? And I'll conclude with this. There are a lot of people who have joined companies, have not been to the head office. There are many people who have joined teams of a minimum of 8 people, have never seen their team members, except on Zoom, Skype, or MS Teams. So in our job as leaders, not as managers, of all the things we choose to say first when we see these people, and there are many things that we can say, imagine if we chose to be kind. Instead of saying, where's my report? I demand operational excellence, financial sustainability, and this notion of holding a person finally accountable. Imagine as leaders if all of us can say, when I look you in the eye, in the centerpiece of the pupils of your eyes, and I say, what do you need? Can I get you something? That's what makes us truly human.
The pandemic features quite prominently in the book, and you were chatting off air, and you said you wrote it in a space of 2 years when you were confined to your home, which makes sense. When you speak of COVID, well, when we think of COVID, we think of this invisible, colorless, odorless enemy. In the book, you speak about the color of COVID. What is the color of COVID?
It's black and predominantly feminine. Because it affects black people disproportionately.
Yes.
It's black because we talk about digital inequality. It's black because, you see, when you live in a township and in Soweto there's 3.5 million people. Officially, last census, they said just over 2 million people. Even if you accept it's over 2 million people. This is more than the population of Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini. Bigger than countries. Majority of houses are 4-roomed houses. There's 1 bedroom for parents and 1 bedroom for girls. You and I, we have a choice between the kitchen and the dining room. Yeah. So when you come up with laws of social distancing, when you have been infected and affected, of self-quarantine, when you come up with laws that says you can now work from home and learn from home, be very clear about what you are condemning the people of Soweto to. Because the quietest place in that 4-roomed house is the ablution facility, the toilet is outside. It has 1 cell phone on average, and it's not a smartphone. So when you are a company like Shell, which I was a leader of for 8.5 years, and you give these people a laptop and a smartphone and say, you are now going to be set up at home, and you give them a dongle through which they can access their Wi-Fi. So they move from the Dimension Data campus in Bryanston to Bree Street at the taxi rank. At the time where 13.5 million of us are transported by these taxis, not by the trains when you and I grew up to school and to work. And we know that these taxis are not safe, they are not cheap, they are not easily accessible. You condemn them to this laptop and the smartphone, at the very least, to be nationalized, if not outrightly confiscated.
Yeah.
So when you sit as a black manager and you say, I've done my job, I've given them laptops and smartphones, have you really?
Yeah.
Because what this color of the pandemic has taught us, it's exactly that when you're in a position of leadership, can you honestly look at things differently and to try and make the lives of your own people better, to lead differently from the way that you've been managed? Lastly, if you are now an executive at Unilever, have you asked yourself why Band-Aid and Elastoplast is pink? So that it blends in with white folks' skin, and yet 70% of the users of this are like you and I. That's what we want black people to go into these companies, to think critically and use this power to change this. Because the people who call themselves our leaders have not used this power to change your fate and mine, especially the apartheid spatial planning, where we are still 40 kilometers away from the place of work. Therefore, spending on average 40 minutes one way to go to work, another 40 minutes to go back. Therefore, consuming on average 40% of our monthly wages. If I add food, that's 70%. Therefore, an old mutual talks to me to say I should save realistically, systemically, and systematically. Of this 30% that remains, can I save? So black people are poor by choice, and pandemics like this, of course, will affect them disproportionately. In the book, I say, from the US of A to the Indian Ocean Islands, to the 55 African countries, 1.3 billion people that speak more than 3,000 languages, with a continental GDP of 3.2 trillion South African rands. We have learned that this COVID kills 30% more women than it does men, 43% more black people than it does white people. Hence, the face and the color of the pandemic, like the color of poverty, is primarily black and feminine.
While we're on the topic, you've led organizations such as the BMF, and conversations about triple BEE have come to the fore. As such organizations, have they been relevant, rather, within this pandemic? Have they been loud enough? As you said, the pandemic has affected black people disproportionately. How vocal have they been? How vocal should they be?
I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to move from being vocal to being active. So as black executives, black managers, black people in townships, we expect few things from you guys. One, to be a change agent. Two, to be a social justice activist. Number three, to be a defender of democracy. That's what we expect. And this pandemic has been democratic. And therefore, instead of just being loud, as the BMF we should be saying, what can we do in engaging, interacting, and interfacing with the government to make it easy for us to survive this pandemic. I'll give you an example. In the mines, there used to be 900,000 employees in its heydays. We're the world's #1 gold producer. We are now not even in the top 10. That number has whittled down to 400,000, but still significant. So when you give Roger Baxter of the Minerals Council, the old Chamber of Mines, 400,000 vaccines, Roger Baxter with his members can dispense of that in 90 days. So when you come to the BMF, it has 15,000 paid-up members. It has 110 corporate members. And if you gave them their share, they could probably use it in less than 6 months. Use it up. If you look at individual companies, and I'll talk of Imperial, probably 130,000 employees. The Bidvest Group Limited, of which I'm chairman, 120,000 employees, 7 divisions, 350 companies, 250 of which are operating entities. If you gave them an equivalent of 120,000, Nompumelelo, Tembekile Madisa, can dispense with this in 1 month. Therefore, it's sad, tragic, and regrettable. When last week we read in the Sunday Times, and we heard yesterday the National Minister of Health, Ntatengaka Joe Phatla, saying there's about 100,000 doses of Pfizer vaccine that are threatening to expire at the end of this month. As the BMF, we need to say it shouldn't happen. Because 100,000, as the BMF members, we could get it to our members in the 1 week that is left. 1 week.
Now, the current climate creates very fertile ground for mental health issues to arise. You know, we've seen a rise in depression, suicide, and the likes. As citizens, community members, family members, what should we do to help one another through this pandemic in respect to our mental health?
So I started what's the rule of business and what we can choose to be. And I said, let's choose to be kind. Because you see, wellness, it's not just the absence of disease and infirmity. It's a state of physical, of emotional, of social, and spiritual well-being. Especially mental wellness. When you are stuck in a 4-roomed house in Soweto with somebody you don't or no longer love, it becomes stressful. Hence the jump in femicide during the pandemic. Few of us, thank God, we were stuck in this pandemic with people that we worship the ground they walk on. Besotted with, easy to love, and in fact, we celebrated the fact that we used this time to get closer to our families. Few of us did not let 1 month go by without going to see their parents, wherever their parents are, when we could travel. That's how we chose to use it. So your question goes to the heart of not just what the pandemic has done to us in showing us flames, but it says as a people with great natural endowments, we are now holding world records for all the wrong reasons. And let me enumerate 1 or 2 of them. So first, we are the most unequal society in the world. We took over from Brazil in 2010, Gini coefficient of 0.6. We are a country with the highest unemployment rate in the world. We talk about 46.6% of the population that's unemployed using the expanded definition. Expanded definition says those that have given up looking for a job in the last 36 months. Now we know in the last 23 months and a half, you couldn't look for a job even if you wanted to. So that's the real unemployment rate. But the highest SME failure rate in the world. SMEs matter because we chose to be part of the BRICS trade bloc. In the BRICS countries, new jobs created by SMEs are 60% at least. Here in South Africa are south of 15 percentage points. Lastly, we have the second highest suicide rate in the world, second only to Russia. If I had time, I would also say we have the highest femicide rate in the world, not by a small margin. Our femicide rate is 5 times higher than the global average. So when you put all those things together, you say there's a role to be played by all of us, collectively, individually, and several, especially as black senior executives in our own companies, in the BMF. In BUSA, which is the apex organization that has 55 other organizations belonging to it. Not just Business Leadership South Africa, that has 89 CEOs, therefore 89 individual companies. At BUSA, it becomes member number 1. So all the banks, Banking Association of South Africa, bank number 2. All the mines, Mineral Council will then become member number 3. There's 55 of them. When we speak with one voice and in unison, act ad idem, we can have both an outsized and oversized impact in how we deal with this pandemic at a human level.
The great Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela once said, it always seems impossible until it is done. And when we look at our current economic status, it's dire. But then there are examples such as Rwanda, which you mentioned in the book, Singapore, China, who were in a similar or worse economic situation, but seemingly they were able to rise from the economic ashes. What are some of the lessons that South Africa can take from them so that we too may rise?
So in the book I say Ghana in 1960 gave aid to some of the Southeast Asian countries. In the book I say when you and I were growing up, you had a toy and it said made in Hong Kong. You knew that by the end of that day, it would have disintegrated. Today, these Southeast Asian economies are showing us flames. So in 1960, Zambia's economy was twice as large as that of Malaysia. 20 years later, in 1960, Malaysia's economy is 20 times bigger than that of Zambia. And yet Zambia, at ZCCM in the copper belt, still produces the best copper in the world. There must be something wrong there. In the book, I say there is a case to be made about how we think of ourselves as a people with great natural endowments, so that we are not always victims, but that we can come up with solutions, because every mineral that the world needs is found here in Africa as number 1 or number 2, not number 9, number 1 or number 2. And yet, of the almost 7.5 billion people in the world, the 748 million that have no access to any form of electricity are found here. That's not why it's called the Dark Continent, by the way. That when you think of people that need aid, you think of Africa, not foreign direct investment. We attract no more than 4% of the global FDI as a continent of Africa. And what can we do? That's the question you ask. I think when we don't think for ourselves, we place our future in the hands of others. It is up to us to create our own new world. And that new world must puncture the inflated fallacies that says Africa equals coup d'etats, wars, famine, droughts. That narrative needs to change to say, can we think differently about why we were created in the first place. Let me make an example. So Britain decides to give South Africa back after colonizing us for 370 years. And it says, I'm torn between the black elites that are highly educated and are good farmers, and the white male Afrikaners. And it decides based on, but what do we need? And they say they need three things. Number one, a cheap reservoir of labor in perpetuity. Number two, that will have the first right of refusal of the minerals that come from the belly of the earth of this country, especially gold. Lastly, it says, when diamonds are concerned, you must sell them to us first, but we will tell you the price. Hence, the London Sales Organization was created. The price of diamonds is still determined in London. 97% of all the diamonds are found here. And we're not saying, but if you plant potatoes in your own yard, and somebody passes by and say, I'm in need of potatoes, you determine the price. Therefore, based on those three things, they say, our fate is better with these Afrikaners. And they gave it to them. So 1910, you look at the people who signed the Union of South Africa, not us. So if we don't think critically about why we were created in the first place, so that we reverse that with the power that we have, because we have power now, but we act like we have political power, that we are in office, but we haven't touched the economy. We haven't changed it. There are townships called Vergenoeg. When you go back to why Vergenoeg, it's because the apartheid government made a pact with the Afrikaners to say, we will never build a township close to you. They are good enough to come and work. In Limpopo, at 12 o'clock on Saturday, the alarm used to ring. When it rang and you were a black person, you knew, get out of town. Because 2 minutes later, you were still in town, you got arrested. So if you were working on the pavement and a white person came, it was your job to jump onto the oncoming traffic. So those things we haven't changed. Therefore, what needs to be done? At a macro level, I suppose, one, we need to say, the people that took things that don't belong to them must go to jail. So I'm talking about the top state capture miscreants must go to jail. Yes, sir. Number two, the people that agitated and orchestrated for the 19th of July, those 8 days of rampant looting, where we killed 348 people, 200 shopping malls, 161 liquor outlets looted, 1,400 ATMs we stole, 120 million rands. They are known. We used to call them the dirty dozen. Begit says they are 19 and he called them by name. None of them, not one of them, is in prison. So to send a strategic message that says South Africa is open for business, they must go to jail. So as business, we say they must be charged, they must be convicted, sentenced, and they must serve time. Thirdly, I think we need to complete the vaccine rollouts. You see, you have to love your people to lead them. If you love South Africans, you'll make sure that they're fully vaccinated, that they are now getting their first boosters. And it's not difficult to do, especially if we work hand in hand with business. We have to reduce the government debt because it's becoming unaffordable. We couldn't even get to the COVAX program. The Solidarity Fund of Business had to pay for it, the first and the second tranche. So now when we want to do something, we reprioritize from other government departments. Because when you steal money, eventually it gets finished. We have to reduce the public sector wage bill because we used it as voting fodder and a crucible for cheap votes. 2010, Eskom had 38,000 employees. During Zuma's tenure, it went up to 48,000. The electricity production went down 4%. Lastly, I think if you ask labor what is keeping them awake at night, they will list no more than 3 things. They'll say jobs, transformation, and growth, in that order. If you ask business, they will start with growth, because they understand that if the economy is not growing, very soon we'll be talking about the redistribution of poverty, not the redistribution of wealth. So when the economy is growing, it allows you to do stuff. And South Africa lends itself to the type of economy that could grow. Here's my last take. I think let's learn from the other countries so that we don't reinvent the wheel. If there was an Olympic sport for developing plans, South Africa will win hands down. So China, in 2010, were onto their 12th five-year plan. For 60 years, they've been driving 2 things, and 2 things only: energy security, personal security. Singapore, expelled by its parent Malaysia because they were a hopeless backwater. They couldn't see themselves rehabilitating them. Lee Kuan Yew took 40 years. And in 40 years, they were in the top 5 per capita, highest per capita income in the world, in 40 years. And they did that by focusing on only 3 things, even I can remember them. Number 1 was on meritocracy. Number 2, on pragmatism. Number 3, on honesty. They had a simple rule that says, if you bring a new law as a member of parliament, you must also come with a plan of another law that we must take out so that we don't overcomplicate our lives. When we became free, in that first 5 years, we enacted 109 new pieces of legislation. And we took nothing out.
At this point, round of applause for that, please. At this point, I'd like to open the floor for questioning. There's a hand here already. And then we've got some online questions as well. Can we please start with this gentleman?
Evening all. My name is Fiso Dube. I want to first of all just thank the ULP for making forums like this possible, Baba. Siyabonga. Dr. Bonang Mohale, thank you so much for always having a spirit of, servant leadership, always wanting to give and point to the likes of people like myself. My question is a very simple one. It's not a comfortable one. It's a simple one. I'm a young entrepreneur, a young and aspiring business leader. And I would like to believe I speak on behalf of many people who look and sound like myself, young people. Do you still have hope in the leadership of this country? Like I said, it's a simple one. Do you still have hope in the leadership of this country to turn this ship around? Just on the drive here, I'm listening to the Money Show. Youth unemployment rate has hit 75%. Young people are growing increasingly despondent. And the follow-up question would, this would mostly be the more important question. If you still have hope in the leadership of this country, the ability of this country to turn the ship around, what is that hope informed by? Why do you still have hope that we can correct the situation as a country and as in a community of people?
Professor Dube, you're supposed to ask simple questions. Yes, I still have hope. Yeah. 1, because I'm an eternal optimist. 2, because at times like these, it always helps to know that there's always been times like this. Yes, sir. Yes. South Africans like going to the precipice. Before falling over the cliff, then they pull back. It's not necessary to go to the edge of the cliff, but we do it every single time. I still have hope, but that hope is not misguided. So next month, on the 27th, we'll be 28 years into democracy. We're not a teenager anymore. On average, it takes 20 years to turn countries around, because countries like farms, like airlines, take a long time to die. But die they do. Rwanda, when we voted, massacre, after 20 years, when you go to Kigali, the capital, you get free Wi-Fi in buses. Ladies at 23, 30 walk their Maltese poodles on a leash, go to an ATM, take out their money, put it in a purse, and walk back home safely. I can't take out money at Bedford View at an engine garage midday and walk safely to my car parked nearby here. Therefore, we have to have a serious conversation about how we elect our leaders, because it's not sustainable. Let me end on how does it manifest when you are not purposeful, deliberate, conscious, and intentional about who you want to lead you. I said inequality is widening, not narrowing. Racism is at an all-time high. Black graduates are roaming the streets hopelessly. Public education has collapsed. Public health care continues to fail the poor and the vulnerable. Crucial infrastructure is lying barren. Earlier on I said we used to go to work by trains. Weekly ticket or monthly ticket, US, okay. Today, these railway stations are just there. George Koch, Rodiport Station. Not only did we begin by stealing the overhead electrical cables, followed by the rail track itself and the rail sleepers, we proceeded to steal one brick at a time, the entire station. Not in the middle of the night when people were asleep, during the day. So when you go to the Western Cape, people have built informal settlements on the rail tracks. During the day, rail tracks. And lawlessness has now become an epidemic. You've got an 80% chance of robbing a bank and getting away with it. 80% chance. It's 11 million times higher than playing the lotto. Yes, I still have hope, because all our problems are known and well articulated. But all our solutions are also known and well articulated. The problem with South Africa is the lack of doing, the implementation. It was General George Patton who said, great wars are won by good execution, not great plans, because good execution will save even a mediocre plan. Plans we have, RDP, young people think RDP is a house. Then growth, employment, and redistribution strategy. Then gear, and then the 9-point plan. The overarching economic vision is the NDP 2030. It had 9 objectives. It's clear that in another 7 years we are not going to reach them. But we saw it fit to develop another plan called the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, ERRP. I'll take another question.
A mic to the lady in black, please.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for attending, Mr. Mohale. My name is Marie Sibueng. I'm the CEO for a business called IMS Powerhouse Consulting. And I was listening to you speak a lot around Africa, and we know for sure that Africa is the fastest growing economies right now. We've got the youngest population in the world, the fastest growing middle class. But if we had to bring it back home, A lot has been said about SMMEs, developing new businesses, a lot of plans after plans after plans. In your view, what needs to fundamentally shift to move SMMEs? Because we know it is the cornerstone for our country's economy. I'm looking at the banner behind you about Old Mutual, and those are some of the businesses that were built during apartheid. I can't think of any business, unless you can share, that has been built in this time, or a startup that's been built through the current government. So in your view, what needs to be done for SMMEs? That's the first. And the last one is, when we think about the current SMMEs right now, a lot of the work that gets done is we build almost for South Africa, and the world builds for us. What needs to be done for South African businesses to shift to a more global outlook?
So for SMEs, first we should make it easy for them to do business. It takes on average 3 years to start a business in this country, 350,000 rand and a myriad of laws to comply with. Singapore, it doesn't take 2 days, it takes 2 hours. We spoke to the president on the 28th of January. The night before the State of the Nation address, we spoke 9 times because he wanted to announce the red tape czar, and he did. So there's a lot of red tape that is put on the way that if we removed that, it would make your life easier. The last one around SMEs is when you choose a minister of small or business development, it does help when you want to move forward in space and in time to bring in somebody at least who knows business, knows the difference between income and cash. 1960, we had Ntate E.T. Chabalala, Ntate Richard Maponya, who were black millionaires. 1960. Yes. The National Party would come and sleep in the house in the middle of the night to consult them about what can be done. Even the National Party government did better because they created the Urban Foundation to try and help with the township economy. At every station, there was dedicated places where you could do some business. All of those died. I wanted to end there, but I'm tempted to add one more to say, you see, I said when you have power and you are a black leadership, how do you use this power to change things? There was no casinos in South Africa. All of them were in the former homelands. We became free. We have a law called BEE. That's an acronym for Black Economic Empowerment. As amended in 2007 to broad-based Black Economic Empowerment. There's a law. But when we issue these licenses, we gave them to the usual suspects, not to black people. So when you look at history everywhere else in the world, when you build a shopping mall, it kills the small shop owners. So when Liberty comes to you as a black government and say, we want to build a mall in Alexander, your answer should be, of course, build a mall in Alexander. But because it's going to kill black shop owners, that sent their kids to University of Fort Hare and Turfloop with this money. Make sure that that mall is owned by black people. There's a law. You just use the law. So when you have more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, more than 740, you give them to black people to run them without political interference. That's where they learn, because nobody is born an MD or a president or a CEO. All of us, somebody believed in us, threw us in the deep end, we did it, and now we say we can compete with the best in the world. Had we done that, and we allowed these women, black women, and these black people, just to run these more than 740 SOEs. Some of them, by the way, are bigger than some African economies. Eskom, Transnet, they're bigger. You allow them to run only for 5 years. In 28 years, with 20% of them having failed, because failure is natural. Today we'll be having 3,000 women and men with a demonstrable track record of how to run state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, so that when Kenya Airways and Ethiopian Airways is looking for their MD for their own airlines, they look south to this 82-year-old award-winning African airline. But what did we do? We killed it. Take another question.
The gentleman in the glasses.
I'm not sure. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Ntate Mohale ke a leboga mongame. Ka leina ke Thato Mmereki. So I have 2 questions for you. Before my question, Nikere, if we could adopt fathers, I would probably adopt you. And since I've started losing my hair, it makes sense. So the first question is, do you think we are failing our people or each other, or we just don't care? I'll make an example. So I always make an example to say the difference between us, some of us here, and the gangsters, that Rona, any opportunity for us to get out of the township, we get out. And gangsters stay in the township, and they are close to our younger brothers and sisters. And the difference between us and them is that they have time. Their recruitment strategy is just giving our brothers and sisters time. Rona, we just get out. Another example maybe in government is that, so when I had my first son, unfortunately I couldn't afford private health care. I used one of the public hospitals. And my wife was 42 weeks in, which she shouldn't have. And then we went to public hospital, and when I demanded, or when I requested that, this is not right, the operations manager then, which is the head of the nurses, said to me, if you behave in this way, you will not be in labor with her because we're going to treat her horribly, in my face. I never forget that day, because then I went back and I became humble and then just begged until my wife was out of that place. And then another question is with regards to transformation and maybe accountability. One of the institutions in financial, in the banking sector, which is the sector I'm in, that needs to enforce transformation, it's FSTC. Now, FSTC gets funding from this bank that it needs to enforce transformation from. Do you think we'll be able to enforce that, because then we are biting the hand that feeds us? Which also goes into the audit scams or the audit challenges that we've had, to putting it lightly, where you find auditing firms not enforcing or calling out companies for wrongdoing, because they are saying they might just cancel our contract and go somewhere else because we held them accountable or requested, or we wanted them to be to enforce what needs to be enforced. Thank you, Dad.
Sure. Now we're beginning to talk. Of course, we are failing our people. So today, 28 years into democracy, we have, on average, 7 service delivery protests a day, every day. So Mfulen municipality has 19 motors for the water treatment plants. All of them are broken. Raw sewage pours into the Vaal River water system, not just the Vaal Dam. The people in Pretoria, Mabopane, have been without clean water for at least 3 years. Brown sludge comes out of their taps. The garbage is not always collected on time. schools that were involved in the Natal floods, that saw coffins come up, have not been rebuilt yet. There are schools in the Eastern Cape and in KwaZulu-Natal in that great storm. Wind, roofs blew, those kids are still learning under the trees. Mud schools have not been eliminated in Eastern Cape and Limpopo and Mpumalanga. 2 classes per 1 classroom, the one half of the students face that way, the other, that in the same class, 2 different teachers have not been eliminated. 4 hospitals went up in flames. 2 national key points went up in flames, including Parliament and Waterkloof Air Base, where the president lands and takes off from. National key point says, when you look in our constitution, it's under 24/7 surveillance. You cannot enter unless with a special permit. We don't steal 9mm parabellums from the police station in Alexander, Togoza, Katlong, and Vosloorus. We go to the army base and we go to the infantry and we steal weapons of war, the R4s and the R5s, that we are then going to use in cash in transit. So when you look at the people that jump out of a van to rob a Shell service station, as 21 of them with AK-47s, R4s, and R5s. 21. So if they were to get 20 million, which is that day's taking, it's less than $1 million each, except a service station pumps on average 400,000 liters a month. At 10 rand a liter, you see how much they're going to share. But that's what they do. And they get away with it. So when I say lawlessness has become an epidemic, it's really not a joke. So we are failing our people. 30% is now a pass mark. Imagine going to the doctor and you look at this one and say, I wonder which 50% does this one know? So that's the sad reality of where we have come as a people with great natural endowments, but with huge potential. So what needs to be done? We can go to our cocoons and cry, slit our wrists, nothing is going to change. But I think when we wake up one day and we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, actually, we are the bosses. Because every 5 years, we elect politicians. That must serve us. So if I'm in Alexander, I want to know who's my ward councillor, so that when the manhole bubbles with sewage, I can call and say, please fix, when there's a pothole, that it can be fixed. I call them on their cell number. When you do that, it says, when a politician walks through the door, we stop standing up to attention because they work for us, not the other way around. So when we're unhappy with them after 5 years, we say, we gave you a chance, you didn't fix Alexander. Let's find somebody else who can. I feel tempted to close with this one, that our fellow brothers told us from the rest of the continent that your leaders are going to rob you blind. We said, nah, man. They spent 27 years in Roman Island. Your leaders didn't. In hindsight, we have learned 3 things about our leaders in Africa. That one, These Uhuru presidents of 40, 50 years of their people are not good for Africans. Because what you can't do in 10 years, how can you do it in 50 years? Two, that even the good guys left on their own eventually become the bad guys. Lastly, that you need a viable and vibrant opposition to keep the good guys in check. I'll make an example with the arrogance we saw of the ANC. So some of them even told us that are seeing now, we will rule until Jesus comes. Did he come quickly? They used to go to the stadium and they had a saying that asinavalo. Siyawutshanji. Now asinavalo, it means I have no fear. I have no scruples. I've got no morals. Andinambeko. And we allowed them to say it in front of us, and we didn't internalize it. Their president, who was stealing money from us, survived no less than 8 motions of no confidence in Parliament, protected by his own. But Tamile Dlamini told us to say, Manitou Zuma must go. Looked all of them in the eye and said, all of us have little skeleton yana. And we didn't believe her. So today it's probably easier to count those initial 400 MPs in Mandela's cabinet who are not thieves than to count those who are, because there's so many of them. So black man, you're on your own. Take another one.
Yes, sir. We've got a
You'll
question.
stop me because this is your time.
No, we are flowing that. We are flowing. We've got a question online from Edward Ngomane. Being born and bred in Katlehong, what are some of the legacy projects he intends to create in giving back to his community? Is there any means of collaborating in that regard?
Yeah. So, at a high level, the countries that deal better with the vaccine rollout, and therefore the pandemic, are the ones that have realized 2 things. One, this notion called common purpose. We had our common purpose, it was apartheid, the enemy was known, singularity of purpose, we went for it. The second is this thing called greater good. I can't just do things for myself. I must do it for us. Because none of us is as strong as all of us together. Greater good says, the Japanese say, before you become a millionaire, make somebody else a millionaire. Greater good says the scientists will look funny at a monkey that hoards all the bananas to itself when the others are hungry. Because the survival of the clan, a parliament of monkeys, is in the group of them. Because the one climbs the tree and says, I can see the lion coming. The other one at the bottom says, but there's Miss Cheetah at the bottom here. That's how they survive. The one says, let's eat to our full because I saw a field of maize to the north of us. After this, we're going to raid that. That's what leads to their survival. But we human beings, when somebody does that, we put them on the front page of Forbes magazine. It took Barack Obama at the Wanderers Stadium when he was delivering the Holy Nelson Mandela's lecture to say, when you have 21 luxury cars, I mean, how many can you drive at a time? So I'm from Katlehong.
Yes, sir.
Ntate Maurice Gadebe is from Katlehong.
100%.
The Vice Chancellor of the University of the Witwatersrand, Zebulon Villagas, is from Katlehong. We sat here, the three men from the east. So what Susan has done, Susan is my lovely wife, 24th of August last year, we celebrated 40 glorious years of marriage. So what she has done is every year, because we've got a library at home, not just a study. So we take these books and we put them in the boxes. Some of them we haven't even read. We take them to Katlehong High School. Yantate Lepile Taunyane, the late. Because that's where both of us met. Every year. Every year, I go in person to go and talk to the grade 11s and grade 12s. We used to call them standard 9 and 10s, metric. So that they can touch and hug a chancellor, a professor, a chairman. Because I say to them, Nekitula ka mo morapos. 7548 ko mtlu. 1403 kon hlapa. That if Bonang can make it, so can I. There's no rocket science. Because you can't miss that which you don't know. Lastly, not just about Katlehong. This is a black thing. We shouldn't even reinvent the wheel. You see, when a Jewish person has a piece of land in Sandton, you can bet your dollar that the architect will be Jewish, the builder will be Jewish, the plumber will be Jewish. So when an African has money, they want to run so far from anything and everything that reminds them of their Africanness. So today you go to the Western Cape, you see Cape Dutch architecture. Because they want something that reminds them of home. Hey, you don't see black millionaires but build them around davels with thatch roof. The art and the murals don't look anything like, they don't get it from Alexander. They want Pierre Neves. They build Tuscany, which is found only in Italy. That's when they know they've arrived. So until and unless we change that, we'll be forever at the mercy of others. Muslims do the same thing. That's why it's easy amongst Jewish people and Muslims when one says, guys, I've got a brilliant idea. They don't talk about due diligence, of human capital and commercial due diligence. They say, how much do you need? 10 million. And so I've got one. The other one says, I've got two. They raise 10 amongst themselves. Not only that, the next morning, they could wake up in the morning and go to the shop nearby here. But they go to you to support you. Because they want to set you up for success. Jewish people don't get the Sunday Times delivered to their homes and wake up with a gown and slippers in the morning to fetch their Sunday Times and read it in bed. They shower and walk 3 kilometers down the line to buy their Sunday Times from another Jewish shop. That's why their rent circulates 13 times amongst that community. And in Soweto, it doesn't even circulate once. Because the clever starts Soweto. There's Maponya Mall. 180,000 square meters of mall. 200 shops. Cat Geiger. But some of the guys in Soweto say, "Mari imagine, se ke tswa mo Maponya Mall, ke tshwere di paper bag. Ke batla lo di lata ko Sandton." On a much more serious note, Brian Joffe thinks of starting a business and he's got nothing. He goes to a shul and he sits next to Stephen Kosef of Investec. And he says, I've got a good business idea, says, don't talk to me, we are praying, but come and see me on Tuesday in my office. He comes to see him on Tuesday. He gives him his first 7 million rand to start the business. He didn't start he went and bought a business. And he says something else. He says, when you see these businesses and you're sure you want to buy them, come to me. We've got systems and process. We'll do the due diligence and we'll finance them. That's how the Bidvest Group was created. 32 years later, this group was broken into half. Their food businesses, which was global, was listed separately as Bidcorp. And Bidvest South Africa stayed.
Got another question online from Mukosi Blessing. From bread price to petrol, can Prof touch a bit on how Africa will be impacted by the war in Ukraine and how we can recover from this pandemic? The rest I don't see, but yeah, I guess you get the essence of the question, Prof.
Yeah, we're in a difficult space because when Russia decided to invade Ukraine in this unwarranted, unjustified occupation, we knew that the world was going to be affected. So we are just recovering from the global supply chain that was devastated by the pandemic. So we order most of our goods from China. So China, they fill up the whole ship. It goes first to the US of A, 300 million people, 60.1 million of, say, 65 million, by this census that they're making now. So when it gets to the States, they say, for so many months we've been locked up, we need double what we have ordered. So the ship offloads in the US, and it goes back to China. It doesn't come here. Toyota's production went down 40%. When you've been involved in an accident in December, you are still waiting for parts today. So that was the pandemic. With Ukraine doing this, let me digress for a second. So the ANC people say, but we support Russia because they stood with us during our struggle days. So we can't condemn Russia in their aggression. At best, we want to be a neutral mediator. 89% of them were trained in the USSR, former USSR, not in Moscow, in Kyiv. So when you say Russia stood with us, which Russia? Because Ukraine was part of the USSR, and most of them, that's where they got their training. So Bishop Desmond Tutu tells us that in the face of oppression, when you choose to be silent, just silent, by that action you choose the side of the oppressor, not the oppressed. So the Ukraine and Russia, both of them account for 50% of the wheat grains that go to Africa. But Africa has 60% of the arable land in the world. But we net importers of wheat. But in the Free State, we know how to plant wheat. So it will affect the price of fuel, because the world has no capacity to replace the oil that is produced by Russia alone. Saudi Arabia produces about 11 million barrels a year. They've got capacity to go to 18 million. So they have to go and balance this. They produce gas. That gas is piped to Europe. So when they close it, Europe suffers. They'll use more fuel. So this petrol price is going up. Yesterday it was 22 rand per barrel, crude. We don't help ourselves as South Africans. We've got 5 major refineries, Bramoris. I exclude Petro SA. because it's small by comparison. The biggest is Sapref, 180,000 barrels of crude a day, every day on average. So 35% of our 30 billion liters of what we consume as energy, 20 billion we make locally, 10 we import. So Sapref is closed. Engine is next door, owned by the Malaysians. It's going to be turned into an import terminal. The only refinery in Cape Town, they've sold it, which used to be Caltref. Primarily because we lacked the imagination when we had an opportunity to do something about these 50-year-old refineries. When you compare them with Southeast Asia, these are young. But Maurice and I negotiated for 7 years with this ANC-led government around cleaner fuels. So first we took out lead, we did some work, and we paid for it as companies. Then for 7 years, we did 3 things. We said we wanted to go to clean fuels 3. That's European specification, so that when you buy an X7M50I or D, it uses 10 ppm like they do in Europe, so that it lasts longer, it performs better, and it cleans as you accelerate. So there were only 3 things outstanding. One was, let's agree the implementation date. And we all agreed, 2019. Number 2, the specifications. How much of lead do we take out, paraffin, etc. That was agreed. The last contention was a cost recovery model. How are you going to pay us? The cost was 40 billion South African rands, which is nothing. And we said to government, you don't even have to pay us 40 billion rands. Don't. The 5 major refineries. Don't have to pay us. No, you don't even have to let the consumers to pay for it. Wait until you want to reduce the petrol price by 20 cents. Instead of reducing it by 20 cents because they are happy they're getting something, reduce it by 18 cents. They will be happy. And you keep the 2 cents aside, it will pay for the 40 billion in a period of less than 10 years. By reducing the amount with which you are going to reduce the price of fuel, not by increasing it. The communists in the ANC-led government looked at this and said, this white monopoly capital think we are fools. Why should we pay for the upgrade of their refineries? If they were black, maybe. And that's where it crumbled. So Shell now says, you know what? We've got many refineries everywhere else in the world. Why should we play marbles here when we can just bring finished product? It's easier for us. These refineries collectively employ about 33,000 people, highly skilled. And if there are no refineries, they'll go to the Middle East. They'll go to Aliko Dangote's refinery that is building in Nigeria. I hope it helps. How are you doing on your time?
Prof, I think if we had a choice, we would listen to you the whole night. But we are out of time. My final question, before Prof. Khadebe comes to do the closing. Leadership and legacy go hand in hand. As you reflect, what would you like your legacy to be, or what do you want your legacy to be?
Want to say Maurice and I tried our best. We put our best foot forward. We spoke truth to power. We were fearless, like, behold, the turtle, we stuck our neck out. You see, the pandemic has taught us many things. An African adage says, when fisherwomen can't go out to sea, they repair their nets. What are you and I doing to repair our nets so that when the economy finally opens up, as it will, that we can be globally competitive? The last adage says, when a child is not embraced by his village, he will burn it down in order to feel its warmth. You have been extremely generous with your time. Ka nnete ke leboha ho menahane, ke a itebohela hle bakwena.
Thank you. At this time, our CEO will do the closing. Thank you, Prof. You've also been generous with your wisdom. We appreciate you in that.
Thank you so much, Confidence. Let's give Confidence a hand of applause. This is really unleashing leadership potential, you know, for Confidence to be sitting opposite one of the most prominent South Africans that we've... Did you see how he grabs you with these answers, eh? What a storyteller, you know. I didn't want to make my intro long simply because of that. You know, when I watch the news and they say Professor Bonang Mohale from Johannesburg is going to be saying something, I wait. And then before they introduce him, they want to give me his whole resume. And I'm like, no, that's fine, we know, but let's get to the numbers. Because I know he's going to quote numbers, and how that brain and the numbers is something else. But let's thank you, Ntate Mohale, for always honoring us, and Ntate Khateb and the family. We really appreciate it. We don't take it lightly. Let's give Ntate Mohale. And thank you to those who partner with us, National Mentorship Movement. Dave, I heard them speaking about the Jewish community. We're learning. And thank you to Old Mutual and those that made it from Old Mutual. Thank you to everyone who's playing a very pivotal role in the background. We really appreciate it. And we improve as we go on. And without any further ado, let me call Professor Maurice Radebe. I'm not Maurice Radebe, not in shape or in title. Prof.
Ntate Mohale, re a leboga ntate. Let's really clap hands for it. Well, unleashing leadership potential. I'm no longer working. The youngsters are doing the job. I don't know why he's even calling me now, because I wanted to relax. But the wisdom and the unbelievable amount of knowledge. You know, when we were young, we used to have this practicing as young people. Do you have general knowledge? You know? And now, I don't know, they're always all over the iPads. I'm not too sure whether they have the kind of knowledge that you've demonstrated today. So thank you very much. And let's clap hands for Confidence again. You know, I like to tell this story because every time at ULP, I just want to tell you, ULP is just a platform for you sitting around this table to unleash your potential. This young man was attending ULP for many sessions here during the pandemic. You know, during the pandemic, we used to be full here. And he came to me and said, I've got an idea. And I said, tell me. And he said, the quote you said there is called, until the lions learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter, African proverbs. And he said, I want to stop this for the African people. And I said, so what do you want to do? He said, I want to really start this program called Authors Forum. Then we said, okay, fine. We'll then use the platform called ULP. And we've laid the platform. Platform of ULP is like Facebook. You can do whatever you like to do. But one thing we want you to do, if you've got a passion to make a difference, you must put a lot of energy in it. You must think. You must make sure that you really work at it. And he did that. And look at now, we've got a ULP forum, Authors Forum. Not only does he does these forums, but he also teaches classes. So if you're an aspirant author, but not only does he do that, through the ULP forum, we're going to the townships now. There's a young leaders program. And if you want to help, there you are. So all I'm saying right now, as I say, I no longer do the work now. It's all these young people, the CEOs of this, and the COO there at the back. Let's give him a round of applause. So why am I telling you this? Is that it is important. I must always remember to acknowledge the tenant, that I'm a tenant here, the landlord. There's my wife at the back there, Joyce. You must all be grateful to her that we've got this. So the reason I'm challenging you, and now we have formed a partnership with Dave and the National Mentorship Movement. Dave, please stand up so that they can see you. We want mentors. So I want to challenge even online here, every person, ULP's, how many years now, Theo? 12 years at least we've been operating, and some of you are now have grown through, and you're executives. We want to have this mentorship movement being what you were talking about. Actually, that's exactly what Dave said. In the Jewish culture, mentorship is now is ingrained, is embedded. And we want to, through the national mentorship movement, we want to make mentorship a national movement. So if you want to be a mentor, please indicate very, very quickly. Tsepo is there at the back. Dave is here. Theo is here. And you just say, leave you on top. Yeah, there's on top. There's top. Top is our administrator. And previously, Nono was our administrator, but she's becoming a digital entrepreneur now. Let's clap hands for her. So, please, we want mentors in great numbers, because we want these. You will be trained as a mentor. You will, so that you mentor another person. Lift as you rise, and we'll make sure that you participate and you learn. You do exactly what Dr. Mohale is doing. That's what we need to do, and that will change this country. And now, finally, I'd like to thank our partner. It's actually mutually collaborate. We're mutually collaborating in order to really participate in lifting this and make a ULP platform sustainable throughout, and it outlive all of us sitting around this table. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, and God bless you.